that's it. I've been a master gardener since 2018, and I've had the advanced vegetable training in 2023. My specialty is actually container vegetable gardening because I live in soil. I mean, I lived in Center Point. I used to live in, but there's no soil, so I think a lot of you are in the same place. But my big thing is container vegetable gardening.
Okay, we're happy to have you here today.
Okay, and I was asked to provide something on just the basics, beginning vegetable gardening. How many people here are beginning vegetable gardeners? Okay, how many people have a little bit of experience with it? Okay. And how many, no matter what seed you plant, you can grow a beautiful vegetable garden?
Well, all right.
I have cedar fever that has affected my so bear with the squeaking. Anyway, these are, we'll talk about it later, but those tomatoes are out of my garden, and the large ones are either Bellis or red snappers. We'll talk about that later. Once I figure out how to do this. Okay, the struggle is real, right? How many of you guys have actual soil in your yard?
I'm so proud.
How much did you pay for it?
All right, well, you're very, very lucky. Most of us have very little soil, and because the rock shelf is just so close to the surface. Most parts of the country, you do a little shake test, you put some water, you put your soil in a jar with water, you shake it up and let it settle out over a number of hours, and you'll have a good 10% of organic matter being leaves, nice things that degrade into good soil. But you do that where I live and there's nothing floating. So most of us have to bring in soil and then improve it as we go along. Most of us are going to be dealing with containers or raised beds. How many have raised beds? Containers. Okay, yeah. And, the struggle is real. That's what we have to deal with here. But there are some good things about it. Now, other things, more struggle. The heat last summer. I mean, unbearable heat, drought, high winds and hail. What happens when you put out your group of tomatoes out there and here comes a storm? The winds flatten it and, your branches get broken and it's just a mess. It's either the wind or the hail and it always comes along right after you planted them, right? Okay. How many people, what I do now, and I'm sure a lot of you do now, is you grow up 2 sets of tomato seeds, a couple of weeks apart, and you just reserve them. That way, if they get taken out, bye-bye, and you just put the new ones right in, because it happens so often. We can plan for heat and wind protection. How do you handle wind protection? What kinds of things have you done?
Cages. I have a rolling wire 5-foot fence, and I just put the shade material on it.
Right. Right, that'll do it. Some people will use, you have a lot of the skinny cedar posts, you can string that through a fence. You can grow up things like your corn or your amaranth or something. What I do is I do water collection, rainwater collection, and I have 3 giant tanks, which not only helps with the wind, but it also helps to mitigate the temperature. It's warmer in the winter and it's cooler in the fall because of all that water mass. So there's a number of things we can do. You just have to be creative. Stagger spring planting, that works well for me. put a set of stuff out and reserve some for 2 or 3 weeks later. Sometimes I use them, sometimes I end up giving them away. But we'll talk about, the dates and the freeze dates and everything and the time to plant. Also plant vegetables for your region. And we'll talk a little bit about how to find out what kind of vegetables do well in your area. But if you're planting something that does well in Florida with all the humidity, it might not do well here where we don't have the humidity. Or if you're planting something, say a tomato with 120 days before it produces some of the old German, well, what's going to happen is you're going to plant it and then it's going to be 95 degrees really quickly. It's not going to produce before it gets too hot for it to do anything. So with most of your vegetables, you're going to be looking at your shorter date to production. Like if it says 60 days, 70 days, 80 days, the most I would go would be something like 85. There are exceptions like, okra and things like that. But for the most part, that's what we're going to be doing. Raised bed or container. This is, did you ever know that you can grow corn in containers?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've grown corn now for 3 years.
A lot of
in
different
containers.
states.
And it's a special type of corn that is designed for a container. And the only problem with it is, it's tall and the wind comes along, so we actually had to put posts in and then put a rope around them to hold them up. And because it's not a large amount of corn, now these were more kind of in a long group. Now I plant them, put the planters around in a circle because, corn is wind pollinated. I end up hand pollinating it the other day to get corn because there's just not sufficient mass. If you ever go by a cornfield up in Ohio, you'll notice that the corn growing on the stalks right near the road don't do so well. It's because it's wind pollinated and they don't get as much benefit. The ones in the middle will have the best pollination. Just an aside.
How big are those pots actually? Kind of, the picture's kind of deceptive.
It's bigger than this one.
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty big. And it'll tell you to put 9 seeds around there, and I followed directions on the thing and had corn every year, and as long as I hand pollinate, it's pretty darn good.
Do the deer eat the outside of this?
The whole thing is I have a fenced area with like a 7-foot fence. So
I'm scared of them.
now the other garden here is a smaller garden. That is our special opportunity garden that the master gardeners have for folks with developmental disabilities. And we help them garden. So that's an example of an example of a raised bed. The only thing I would say about that is there's not enough distance in between the beds. So with a group of people out there, people tend to trip, slip, and fall. So we have to be very careful.
How much corn can you put in that container? How many spaces is that by seeds?
I think the directions call for 9 seeds. Now, not all 9 grow,
Of course.
but maybe 5 or 6
Okay.
would. And then I do multiple containers.
What kind of corn?
We aren't allowed to give proprietary corn that hasn't been approved, So what I will say is if you
suggest?
if you Google deck corn,
So will heirloom seed corn not grow in a pot like that?
I don't know because I've never tried it. These are a little bit shorter. They only get to be about
So
this tall.
they're hybridized or GMO'd, or are they hybridized in?
They're a hybrid. They're not GMO. Yeah, but they are a hybrid. But you might want to try it.
I wonder what they crossed them with to get them to be short.
I don't know. It's a corn that is a combination. It's a sweet corn, a combination of like white and yellow corn. So it tastes sweet, but not as sweet as what is it, Silver Queen? That's one that's real sweet.
Yeah, I think the silver queen is, yeah.
But it's not quite like that. All right, these are my raised beds. Well,
Yeah, that's a raised bed.
Yeah.
And it will never rot or, you
These
know.
ones, I started out putting artichokes in, and artichokes is a perennial. It goes for like 7 to 9 years before. I took mine out at 8 years, but they have deep roots, so I needed that.
What are those beds made out of?
This material here is.
What is it?
Concrete?
Is it granite?
Granite.
It's,
About concrete.
it's, you know what it is? It's zinc cutouts from granite countertops. And they were
Wow.
free.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that.
Wow.
We got them in San Antonio, so the size of the bed was kind of determined, you know, the littler, shorter ones were the lower one.
How hot do they get in the summertime?
It's fine. Yeah, it's
Does that affect the
fine.
heat of the soil temperature?
It doesn't seem, you know, heat is always a problem when you have a super raised bed like that, or if you have a container, always gonna be a problem. I think black or darker colors are worse. But I haven't had a problem with it. One advantage of these are you can take a cattle panel or PVC pipe or whatever. If you bend your cattle panel between these, right? I usually do it on these beds over here. Then you have a trellis for like your squash that need to hang down. And then you can walk underneath and pick them.
And protection from deer if you close it off.
Pardon me?
And maybe protection from deer if you close it off.
Yeah, but this is fenced.
Oh, that's right,
So,
okay.
I mean, a fence is essential.
It's very elegant, and it's reminiscent of, I'm sorry, but the graveyards and. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I told, well, it doesn't look quite that nice now, but
That
they
looks like
do,
half
they're
a
still holding
sarcophagus, yeah.
together, and I'm still using them, so. But anyway, so you use what you have is the point. Deer don't like to jump high, and they don't like to jump wide. So the amount of, you're gonna need a fence. You know, because people ask us, well, what kind of things will deer not eat? And the truth is, if they're hungry enough, they're gonna eat anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Except
my garden is
alpine
right by,
daisies.
there's kind of
They don't eat them.
a road that, it used to be part of a,
Probably smell bad.
you know, a lot in the subdivision. But it got abandoned because it was in a floodplain, so, but it goes down to a creek, and so all the deer go right by my house, and then they go right back. So I really needed a fence. So, the larger your garden is, the taller the fence you're gonna need. If you have a very small garden, because they don't like to jump into something that they don't think they can jump out of, you can go with a lower fence. But for anything fairly big, you're gonna need to be at least 7.5 feet. They've also done some.
I just want
Way
to
more
say,
than 4 feet.
we live on a
Yeah,
hill, and we didn't have a lot of
Yeah,
flat
they
ground.
never come up to that fence.
Yeah.
And we ended up just buying a 10 by 20 chicken coop off of Amazon that was closed and contained. We just tapped it into the rock, and it never moves, and nothing gets in it.
Perfect.
So,
But it's something you do have to think, we have a hill too, and we were gardening down below, and we have a 7-foot tall fence, but the deer going down the hill, when they're going down the hill, they can jump across and get in, but they couldn't get out. Yeah, so anyway, we have something happen here. They are doing studies on electric tape, and I don't know if A&M's done one, but the most recent one I read was, I think it was Lubbock, Texas Tech, where they're doing like a series of 3 fences with electric tape and a charge, and it's pretty complex. So I don't know if anybody's really gonna be doing it. If you're serious about gardening, you're really gonna have to put up a fence. We have fruit trees in our front yard, and we have done the electric taping, because the front yard is not deer fence. We have about a 5-foot fence. But once, about 10 years ago, a deer got zapped by that electric fence, and we've never had to do it again.
They're a fast learner.
Grandchildren.
He went to all his friends, don't come over here.
Yeah. Armadillos. How many people have armadillo problems? And they're a problem because they dig under things. So you're gonna have to go down under the ground. Now, and they get in there and then they snoop and they actually dig. Now skunks, they will snoot a little bit, but they're not gonna dig under your fence. So, what I've done, you need to go down at least 6 to 8 inches. And I don't know if my beds are large enough that an armadillo is not gonna get up there. But in the lower one, it's cement holding, there's a cement groove that those, slabs fit into, the granite slabs, and that cement goes down about 6 to 8 inches. And the only thing we had to worry about is the gate. So you got to be serious about those armadillos, because once they, and then you've got things like the neighbor's cat, my dog. I would actually jump up on those raised beds to get tomatoes.
Not after the first meeting.
Bird netting, people have used bird netting. Okay. The thing with the bird netting is you only want to put it up while your, produce is, pretty much ready to eat. The birds don't like things that aren't ripe, for the most part. And they'll go after peaches before they're ripe, but none of my other fruit or vegetables. But once they start getting ripe, they'll start to go. And you want to put some kind of frame up. I use PVC pipe like Tinker Toys and just make a frame and drape the bird netting over it. You can buy the bird netting from a greenhouse store on Amazon. My bird netting generally lasts about 3 years. You don't want to let you want to keep the bird netting kind of either rolled up or up off the ground, because you can trap snakes in it, and snakes are good. Snakes will keep rodents out of your garden. I use bird netting over my blueberries, which you didn't hear me say because they're not recommended. but we catch snakes almost every year, even when I try really hard to keep it off the ground and rolled up. Inevitably, something will fall and the snakes will get in there. They can't get out, they die. And you want your snakes. You may not think you want your snakes, but you want your snakes. Bugs, row covers. Okay, anybody use row covers?
On the hoop.
You can use them on a hoop. You can use them directly over the plants. If you have something like a tomato, you're probably going to have a hoop or some type of frame. If you have something like kale or chard or, your cold crops, you can just, lay it over. But again, things that need pollination, you're going to have to pull that back.
Can you spray anything like soap water on the plants to keep it going?
What can I say? Okay, so I'm going to say use what works for you. A&M, we, don't recommend anything that's not proven by research. Now, Dr. Manasabi out of A&M, Hasanadi out of A&M, who's the other one? I think David Rodriguez out of San Antonio has some written articles on home remedies and home things that you can do that might work. But the bottom line is there's nothing you can just go out in your garden and magically spray and the bugs are gone. It doesn't work like that. The way you handle the bugs is either with a barrier, like the row covers. I use net bags over my large, there's nothing like a really nice big beefsteak tomato, and then you come out and bugs have gotten it, it's no good. So I use actually net bags that are designed to put on peaches, and I will go out there and I will cover and tie these net bags on my tomatoes to keep the, squash bugs and that kind of thing off of it. You have to watch it when it rains. And if you have tomatoes that are clustered, you kind of have to sacrifice some because you don't want you want the rain and the wet to dry up. So, but barrier, the other thing with bugs is you want to get your crop in, you want to get it grown before the bugs find it. And that'll work with almost everything except squash. Has anybody ever tried to grow squash? Squash bars. Squash vine borers. About the only thing that works for me for the squash vine borers is one, if I only grow squash every 3 years, I do really fine and get a lot of nice squash and then they find me.
Yeah.
Or the other thing I do is if you grow squash that are the, like the acorn squash, or the winter squash that you think of as winter squash, and some of the Italian heirloom squashes, that have a harder shell and the vine, and the borers will still get in the vine, but they're hardy. They're very, very hardy. And so you just pile your dirt up around it, pour some water on it, and just keep on going. And you may have heard, well, you can cover it in tin foil and all that kind of thing. So, once you see them, pick them out, try to get them out of their mess. So, anybody have any other varmints other than these? Yeah, the neighbor's cat is the one. Oh dear. Let's go back to where we were.
I have a quick question about the raised beds and the construction of them. Is there a difference as far as like the thickness of the outside wall? Because we were looking at cinder blocks.
We actually have the master gardeners have a project garden in Kerrville. It has cinder blocks.
Okay.
It works.
Okay, cool.
With the added benefit if you can plant things in the little holes, smaller things.
Yeah, and put rebars for the
Yeah, or if
covers
you're
and all that stuff.
interplanting, like you can, you've heard you can plant, what am I thinking of? Marigold, that's it, yes, marigolds. You can plant your marigolds around the outside of
I
those.
don't like them, they stink.
Maybe you can pull the bugs.
Natural bug repellent.
Okay.
Here's
I
another
try
kind
to
too.
Anybody
Genius.
grow geraniums? Yeah. When I'm deadheading the geraniums, I will put those in my tomato plants. And, a lot of the flowers, the bugs looking for vegetables don't like. So,
I have a question on those raised beds. Do you put a liner before you pour in your?
actually, I did. The plastic, it's actually gone now and it's still holding it now. So, as with any raised bed, one of the problems is it's going to sink. So we'll talk about that.
What do you do about for drainage, water?
It's ground underneath. Yeah. So, it's really important to, when you're picking a site for your raised bed, it's really important that you look at your property through all of the seasons. You want to know what the sun's doing. You want to know where the shade is. You don't want to be at the bottom of a hill because you're going to get a frost pocket maybe. If that's all you have, then just be aware of that. But you want to look at what's happening in that area. Does it flood? Not likely. Like wherever it floods. But you do want to take a look. I got called out to a nursing home that wanted to start a container gardening program. And they showed me the site that they had picked. And there was a fence on one side, a building on another, and a big tree. But most importantly, when you looked at that site, there was nothing growing there. What does that tell you?
Just say no.
If weeds don't grow, their vegetables aren't going to grow there, no matter what. So I had them do a thing where they checked the sun every 2 hours during the day for 3 days. Because when I went out there, it was overcast, you couldn't tell. And sure enough, it was too shady. So, you need at least 8 hours of sun. Except, now there is one exception to that, except in the dead of summer when you're getting up over 90 degrees, you're going to need some shade in the afternoon. So if you have a place on your property where you get shade in the afternoon, starting at about 2 to 2:33, you're going to be fine in the hot summer with only about 6 hours. but generally they tell you 8 hours, so that's what I'm teaching you. South to southwest facing or possibly southeast. Protected from the wind. We talked about that. You can make your own wind barrier, you can grow it. Avoid creek side or the bottom of the hill. We talked about the bottom of the hill having frost pockets, but what's wrong with the creek?
Might flood.
It might flood, that's true, but also there are many more bugs by the creek. There are many more critters by the creek. And I mean, like one of the bugs they have is sharpshooters that tend to like those riparian areas. And if you're trying to grow grapes or you're trying to grow some other vegetables, the sharpshooters will carry disease. Have you ever heard of Pierce disease in grapes? Yeah, the little sharpshooters carry there. Okay, so avoid septic drain fields or aerobic fields. I know a lot of us that have no soil have the aerobic sprinklers. You need to be near a water source, and that's because do you really want to be lugging water? You don't.
I sure do.
The book says 8 to 12 inches is the recommended depth for a raised bed, but in the hill country, you're going to need 12 to 18. You're going to need some depth. And if you're doing something like carrots or root crops that are long, or things like artichokes that have a lot of root mass, you're probably going to need something deeper. Not as deep as what my husband built for me, but okay. So what you're looking for is 3 to 4 feet wide as long as needed. The reason you don't want to go more than 4 feet is because you only want to go what you can reach on each side. So, and you want to have sufficient room between them so that you can walk. I don't know, has anybody ever visited the children's garden at the Arboretum? It's a Bear County Master Gardener project along with A&M. They do some research and some test crops there, but they built their beds really close together. And I was out there watching the kids, and it's chaos. They're going to kill themselves.
Gardening.
So do you use your toddlers like a keyhole garden?
I don't have a keyhole garden, but we have people that do, and that's a great idea. The idea being the keyhole, you can get in there and work with it. Plus, some of those keyhole gardens also have an area in the middle where you can put your food scraps and everything in them and then just pour your water in, so it'll also fertilize. So I'm very lazy with the garden that I showed you, that's the Opportunity Garden. We have 4 compost bins to improve the soil. We do wonderful composting there, just the way the book says. However, in my own garden, I have a fallow raised bed. I just dig a hole, put my kitchen scraps in there and cover it back up. Within 3 months, it's all gone. But I've got worms in there, so not that I put there, they just came. So I'm lazy about it. If you're looking for soil for your raised bed, you want fertile soil, rich in organic matter, without not nematodes or Texas root rot, also known as cotton root rot. Good soil is hard to find. You don't want soil like, let's say, a subdivision goes in and they scrape off the top of the soil and they freeze soil. You don't want that. You want to go to, non-big box nursery or someplace, a landscaper, someplace where they have gardening soil. And you want it to be real soil. If you go to a big box store, they'll have these bags of things that say garden soil, but if you open it up, what's in it?
Wood chips.
Wood chips, yes.
That's
Wood
magic.
chips that
They're done
are
that.
sprayed with fertilizer.
Yep.
And I don't have anything against fertilizer, but those wood chips are not gonna help your raised bed develop into a nice fertile raised bed. And the reason I know that is because that's what I did. It's 10 years later, and I still don't have it to the point where I want it to be. Because the wood just takes so long to degrade, and the stuff they spray on there is good for, say, 3 or 4 months. And then it's brought nothing to the table. So it's worth investing in good soil. Okay.
Addendum on the earthworms. The plant house over in Kerrville sells them. And I bought some of the chartreuse earthworms. There was 12 in it, so I put 2 in each of my beds, and they were this big, and they're beautiful.
What was the name of it?
Yeah, the plant house over there in Kerrville, but they had also the bags of ladybugs, if you want the ladybugs, and they had nematodes, and they also had the earthworms that you can just put in your garden.
Yeah.
So.
Also, and again, speaking for A&M, we don't recommend any particular nursery. We just recommend your local nursery that knows the area, knows what grows there. But I will say that one thing about that particular nursery is that they have plants in the summertime. If it's $5 at Home Depot, it's $1.87 at that place.
And other people know their business.
Yeah.
That you can ask them any question about gardening and plants, and they can tell you.
And they also, they have the rodeo tomato every year.
Mm-hmm.
But then in San Antonio, I think, is it Rainbow and Mossburgers and those, they all have the rodeo tomatoes. But we'll talk about rodeo tomatoes. So you're going to have to pay money for that soil, but it's going to be worth it in the end. You can also, if you have an area of your property that has good soil on it, you can move it. And that's what I did. I moved some from down by the creek mixed with 30-year-old horse manure from when my horses were there years and years ago. And that's how I started some of it, but I didn't have enough. And that's when I went for the bark, which is a big mistake. Now, the other garden I showed you, the Opportunity Garden, that was started as an organic garden, and they've been composting in bins for about 7 years. You can grow anything in that garden. It is very fertile. Okay, actually, this is from the Opportunity Garden. That's one of our compost bins. We have 2 black ones that were donated because if you get one of those, you try to use it, you want to kill it or throw it out. So one of them I donated that I got from my neighbor who was going to throw it out. And then I wanted to throw it out, so I put it there. But then we have 2 open bins that are wire around the side, and those work much better. But the idea is with composting, you got your wet stuff, you got your dry, you got green stuff, green wet stuff, you got your dry stuff, and then you put more water on it. And over time, out of the bottom, you can take your good soil out. And of course, you have to turn it. This is an example of it. It's a big screw that you just screw in and you pull it up. It's easier on your back than shoveling. Works great, but I'm lazy. I've tried composting the right way, and the thing that works for me is just digging a hole, putting it in it. There we go. It'll work. So, once you get your soil in that raised bed, you want to find out what kind of soil you have. If it's soil from around here, east of I-35, it's likely alkaline soil. Alkaline soil, you can grow most things. There's some things you can't grow in it, like blueberries. Not a vegetable, but there's some things that people don't like it. Now, supposedly, okra likes acid soil, but it grows just fine for me, so it's not too picky. So, but the thing is, it costs about $37. You'll get some instructions, and they used to give out a little bag, but I think now you put it in bagging. And you retest about every 3 years. And that will tell you what you need to do to your soil. Okay? There's pretty much nothing you can do to make it less alkaline. I know they sell products, but our soil is so alkaline, none of that is really going to work. If if you wanna plant a vegetable that likes alkaline soil, you're gonna need to put it in a very tall raised bed and just bring in peat moss and that type of thing, or put it in a container with the peat moss based soil. Okay, so you're gonna add organic matter. Once A&M, and the test, when they send it back to you, they'll say you need nitrogen about this much per amount, and then, or they'll say you need this or you need that. One of the things that can happen, not so much, well, in the tall raised beds, and is that, you're putting fertilizer on it every year, and you're putting fertilizer on it every year, you're putting fertilizer on it every year. Well, you can build up too much of the wrong thing. So that's why you need to test it. And I mean, I know a lot of people only test every 5 years, but if suddenly you're going along and your garden has been doing really, really well for year and year and year and year, and then suddenly it doesn't do well for 2 years in a row, it's probably that type of a problem. If you're using organic matter, you're like, when you're doing your own composting and you're using organic fertilizers, you're probably not going to have that same kind of buildup because it's less. So, all right. So, and then basically you just add compost, add what A&M tells you to add. Okay, container gardening. This is kind of my specialty, and I kind of started with the containers because the horticulture agent in Fredericksburg did a tomato study. And so suddenly I had 30 tomatoes, plus all my other stuff. So I had no room in my bed. So I went to containers, and I really like container gardening. It's easier to control. It's easier to get the media. It's a great way to start. And also I can put the containers in places where I can't put my raised bed. And you can see my big water tanks. And I put my containers right by the water tanks because it has a little microclimate there. I told you about that earlier. And the other thing I did was raise it up off the ground because I'm old now. I don't want to be leaning over and doing stuff like that. It's a good first step into gardening for people. So if you're a beginner, this might work for you. You can purchase container media. And in this case, it doesn't really matter if you buy the bark stuff because it'll work for 3 months, the 3 months that you're growing something in there, and then you can use it. It doesn't really compost down well, but you can use it for spreading mulch. Yes, you can use it for mulch.
We put it in the bottom of our planters just to take up space.
Yeah.
Because when you start filling up a big planter full of dirt, it's stinking expensive.
Right. When you're going with your containers, I wouldn't put a pepper in anything smaller than this. And I wouldn't put a tomato in anything smaller than this. For vegetables, you don't really care about how beautiful it looks, right? So you can go to your greenhouse supply store or online and you can buy these a whole lot cheaper than you can buy other containers. And they usually come like this one, I think, is in groups of 5. This one might be groups of 10. But they work a lot better. You can also make your own gardening soil. I do that now, and I put a reference there if you want to go look at the formula. That works well too, and that you can compost afterwards. But, pardon me? The website is agriehorticulture10.edu vegetable days. But they give a formula for that. You want to buy, if you're buying media for your containers, you want to buy a media for vegetables. And the reason for that is because they put different amounts of phosphorus and stuff in there. Because if you're growing flowers, you want to grow flowers, flowers, flowers. If you want to grow vegetable, you want to grow the fruit. So you want to buy something designed for a container and designed for vegetable. The other thing is, do not buy the double water retaining media. I tried a big mess, because we have very unpredictable weather in the spring. You can have your things watered perfectly, and then along will come a storm and it'll dump 3 or 4 inches, and there it goes. And if you have this double water retaining stuff, it's going to retain even longer. It's going to kill your roots. The great thing about these containers are they're portable. Like, I usually pick at the end of the season in the fall. From the fall, we have 2 seasons here, spring gardening and fall gardening. A few things go through the summer. But with my fall tomatoes, I will put them on a cart and I'll roll them into my greenhouse. It's a self-made greenhouse out of leftover windows, doesn't have heating, doesn't have cooling, but I do have some water tanks in there that are old water softener things. And for the amount of heating that we need, where you're only going a couple of degrees below freezing, you can put your tomatoes in there and they'll be fine. Now, if we have a big freeze like we had a couple years ago, it's going to be gone. But if I save out a few tomato plants and a few pepper plants, I can put them right in there or put them in the garage when I have too many, and then I'll have tomatoes and peppers at Christmas. And that's about the end of it. I've never gone past personally. And the other thing you can do is you can test out the garden location. Like, I can't put a raised bed here right by these big tanks because we get in there to work with them, and then there's a gate to a pasture right there. So I can't put a raised bed there, but it's a wonderful climate and I can put these here. All right, that just shows that ways to move your stuff. It's portable. You can move it where you want to move it. For when I'm especially talking to people in Kerrville that may have patio homes, they may move their plant to follow the sun. Or keep it out of the sun, follow the shade, whatever you need to do. But the thing is, and like this is a little citrus plant that we just roll in the garage when it's gonna freeze. So a lot of different kind of containers. Another benefit of containers is that it eliminates the soil issues. You don't have to worry about the bad nematodes or the root rot, as long as you're buying from a reputable dealer or you're growing the plants up yourself. You don't have to worry about the soil being too alkaline or not alkaline enough, and it just works out a lot better. Now containers, a lot of different types of containers will work. People use plastic, they use porous materials, you can use all different kind of containers. Doesn't really matter. The only thing is you don't want something that's had toxic substances in it. Like a lot of times we'll see the big cattle, they have some kind of cattle feed in them and they're rubber, yeah. And you want to make sure that they haven't had any toxic chemicals in there. Some of the things you're going to worry about is ivermectin, which you use to worm. I know people like to for COVID, but they actually use it to worm horses and cattle and goats and stuff. But ivermectin will kill your good nematodes, and it'll kill good organisms in the soil. And that the same thing goes if you're using mulch that is straw or hay, or you're going to use hay or straw that you're going to decompose in your composting area. You want to make sure it hasn't been in a field that's been contaminated with weed killer or other stuff like that. So anyway, there's a lot of wonderful things about containers. Let me go through all of that. You can use everything. How many people have used bathtubs or water tanks for it? It all works, you just have to have good drainage at the bottom.
What do you put at the bottom of your containers for drainage? Do you put a layer of gravel or?
You can do a whole lot of things. And the importance is because you want the water to flow through. And as you're watering your container over the season, it's going to compact. And that doesn't leave enough room for the roots to get air. So you are going to want something at the bottom. But it really doesn't matter as long as it's not toxic. You know, you can use gravel, rocks, big branches that are cut up a bit that are going to.
I got rocks.
I got plenty of rocks.
Not too deep. You want to be able to, like in this, with these holes here, you just want to be able to get it up above that so that the water can go out the holes. I used to live on a golf course, not a fancy home, but lived on a golf course, and I had so many golf balls in the bottom. So, and that's how I got started container gardening, because the homeowners association thought vegetable gardens were too tacky.
Oh my
Not
goodness.
have a vegetable garden. This was up in
Time to move.
Illinois. If I put it in containers
Yeah.
or disguised it somehow, you know, like okra has pretty flowers, you can put it out there with your flowers. But then people came along and thought I was growing marijuana. These have to be northerners that don't know what okra looks like. But anyway,
I know it from the store.
yeah. But anyway, that's how I got started.
You don't want the limestone gravel though, do you?
Nothing that's too small.
Yeah, but I was told the limestone gravel was too acidic.
It could burn it. It depends. It depends. I've heard it, yeah. If it's actual lime that you use like in horse stalls and stuff, then it's too much, yeah. Pot sizes, I didn't know this, but pot sizes are not standardized. So what's a 20-pound pot one place on the East Coast is not going to be a 20-pound pot on the West Coast. So this is the smallest that I would put a tomato in. At the end of the tomato season, it's all going to be filled up with fruit. So when you're gardening up here, you need more room. You need more room to hold water. You need more room because it gets hot. You're going to plant your container and your raised bed at the same time that's recommended for the ground. You can use seeds. You can plant your seeds, plant your transplants. Use a clean container. What you want to do with this, at the end of the season, wipe it out with put like a tablespoon of bleach in a gallon of water and just wipe it down and then leave it out in the sun. All right. And you put gravel or rocks in the bottom, fill it with media up to about an inch, 3/4 of an inch from the top. The exception for that would be cabbage. If you're growing cabbage, you want to be way up close to the top because the cabbage grows out. And if you don't have it high enough up, it's going to go out and run into the wall. So even if it doesn't run into the side of the wall, the cabbage, for some reason, you'll get some rot and some fungus and stuff. It needs air all over the base. But that's not the only thing I would really grow in here. Peat moss is wonderful. Or you can just, a lot of the things you buy, it's got 3 months worth of fertilizer in it. 3 months is what you're going to need to get through one season and then use it as mulch. There are vegetables that are designed for containers. They're usually designed for really small containers. You can use a patio or container variety, bush type beans and squash, but I've also grown coal beans in containers as long as I have something for it to grow up. Bush types of beans and squash, again, if you're growing the yellow squash that grows out of the center, if you have it, even one here, by the time you've got squash growing growing to here, and it's going to be malformed, or you're going to have fungus issues. So my squash I usually do in a raised bed. The exception would be something like the vining squashes that are going to go up a trellis. That would be fine. Considerations: overwatering and underwatering is the biggest thing. And with your container, if you're doing container gardening, you need one of these. This measures the moisture of the soil. And you will put it, when your plant's here, of course, you'll put it down to where the roots are. And it will tell you whether it's moist, wet, or dry. If it's dry, you're going to water it until you see water coming out the garden. I'm going to pass this around. This is absolutely
I brought
vital.
one, but it don't work. That'll work.
Now, you can also, you'll also see those. This one is just for moisture. You'll see them for other things like sodium and phosphorus. No, that doesn't work. Just the moisture, it'll tell you. And literally, like when I was doing the tomato study and I had all those tomatoes, it would be the same type tomato, same type tomato containers, same type media, and yet I stick them on in water, and it would be so different plant to plant to plant. I can't explain it, but the media does compact over time. If you use it for one season and then use it for mulch, you don't, I mean, yeah, it does it, but by the time it compacts too much at the end of the season, and you don't really care. If you have a tall raised bed, you're going to get some compacting, and you may have to, we teach to avoid, rototilling at all possible costs. But because it disturbs the organisms that are in the soil, we're really pushing a no-till method. But if you have too much compacting, you're not going to get anything in there anyway. So every few years, you probably are going to have to rototill it, but not every year. Okay, for everything, there is a season. And, when I was growing up, my parents didn't have a garden, and I lived in California at that time. And I mean, there was always plenty of vegetables. And like now, you can go out and get blueberries, you can go out and get whatever. And I never understood that there are specific seasons for planting things. But, I mean, you can't fool Mother Nature. Okay, so let's start with what season do you think those were grown in?
What
Summer.
is it?
Potatoes
Is that oak? Is it like an oak?
Summer.
Summer, absolutely summer. And a little later, we're going to talk about heirloom okra. And
Doesn't
this
look like
is
an
a
okra.
Beck's Big Bug okra.
Probably tastes like one.
Little heirloom okra. How about this one here? Spring. Yes, this is the end of spring, because I got very few tomatoes left, but the squash, that was the year of the cucumber. We still have pickles. Pickles to everybody I know. But moving on towards summer because the peppers are coming on. Okay, and this is cauliflower. So that's going to be the fall, most likely. Cauliflower, for the hill country, they recommend it as a fall crop, but not as a spring crop. And that's because, now I know there's people that do it and they get away with it, and that's okay. But generally, you plant your cauliflower in the fall. Well, it's still warm enough, it gets going, it's going really big, and then it likes cold to get to maturing. So right when you get to the cold, then you've got your cauliflower. So this is actually an orange cauliflower. I'm not sure if that's Flame Store or Scar. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember. But I pretty much grow exclusively Flame Store. Now it's an orange cauliflower. All right. So in the hill country, we're lucky in that we have two solid seasons to plant it. We have spring and we have fall. If you're up north in Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, you plant in the spring and then that's all you got. Down here we've got spring and we've got fall. How do you know what to plant when? you look at your AgriLife Texas Home Vegetable Gardening Guide, which looks like this, and I'll pass this around. It's like, how many pages? I didn't print it up for you because it's so many pages. You can go online and it will, it's wonderful. So this is a resource that's free, it's online. Go check it out. There's a table of vegetables in there. I think it's table 8, and I do have a copy of that here, and it'll tell you the planting date in regards to the freeze date. Now, what does that mean? There are certain things that you seed outside that you can seed directly in the ground, like your beans, like your okra. Number of things you can do that with. But other things you're going to plant inside first. They're talking about the date you put it out. So to plant it, you would go back a number of weeks. Now, the first and last freeze dates for Bandera County, March 16th was the last average frost date. December 1 is the average first frost date. Now that's what A&M says on the source I looked at. If you look at any of the other gardening guides, they may have slightly different dates, but you kind of have to use your common sense. Look at the date, look at the calendar. If you ever, the weather forecast, if you have any freezes coming up, just use common sense. But it will tell you, and I'm going to pass this around too, but it's in the gardening guide. And it's different for different vegetables.
I'm gonna read that.
Yeah, you can print it out at home.
Definitely, I need to get one of those.
Another thing you might be interested in, this is the Easy Gardening series, and I will also pass, I'm going to start this on the other side going this way. But this happens to be the one for sweet potatoes, gives you a lot of good information. There's a whole lot of stuff. Now, you can also buy a book called Easy Gardening for $25, but why do you want to pay $25 when it's online free? And I noticed that at the end of this, I had some references for you, and I noticed on your handout they didn't print out. So you will Google AgriLife Easy Gardening, and you'll see the series. You'll come to a page, and it'll have all kinds of vegetables based on good research in Texas. And it will also have things like composting. It'll have, what else? And how to build a raised bed, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to start this on the other side over here. This just happens to be on sweet potatoes, which if you've never grown sweet potatoes, that's one of the easiest things for you to grow. How many slips started for your sweet potatoes right now? Yeah, okay. Me too. I found one today out in the garage that I forgot about, but I still have water in it, so.
What about regular potatoes?
Regular potatoes are more of a cooler weather crop. I've only grown them by mistake. When I threw out some soil that had, I was actually compost and I, didn't cut up the potatoes enough. Did my thing to cover it up and I had potatoes. But they were like the yellow gold or something. They were good.
Yukon Gold.
Oh, okay. So different kinds of things. Tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, broccoli, cauliflower, those are transplanted before you plant them out. Chard and kale, you can do either. I actually do my chard and kale in as transplants. I grow them up in little pots. It's easier for me to thin. When you're thinning your greens, how many people pluck them? What you want to do is cut them. Because otherwise you're disturbing the soil. Just a little added bit. If you're growing your own, the advantages are you can grow some heirlooms that might not be in your local store. You can buy rodeo tomatoes and that kind of thing. So you can grow what you want, not just relying on the store to have what you want. But on the other hand, you have to have the space, the light, the time. We do have somebody that lectures on propagation. So that would be a different topic, but it's a whole lot of fun. And it's just fun to do neat stuff. How do you know what variety to plant. This is also A&M website. If you search vegetable variety selector Texas, this will come up. And again, I had the websites for you, but it didn't print. And what you will do is you can do it by county or by region. And you're in the Hill Country region, which is right here, except for a little sliver of Bandera County, which is in Medina. But if you're up here, you're at altitude and you're more like the Hill Country. So, or you can do it by county. And this is the first screen. The next screen, you have a selection. You pick what vegetable you want, and it'll tell you what vegetable will do well. Here, it is kind of outdated, so there are some other ways to tell, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're getting on to done. There are two ways to go with your tomatoes: indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. Indeterminate tomatoes include most of your heirloom tomatoes, not all. But an heirloom tomato is the binding, indeterminate tomato is a binding tomato. It has more of a growth habit that's more like a vine. But they tend to go all over the place. Then there are determinate tomatoes. And determinate tomatoes are tomatoes that will grow to a certain height and stop. There's a little bit of difference here. Indeterminate tomatoes, in most cases, you grow them for the spring and then you can cut them back, water them over the summer, but they're not going to produce anything when it's above 90. So, and then they'll start to spread out and do better, and you may have another crop in the fall. But, which is probably a better use of your water. And I know I collect rainwater, that's what I irrigate with. There's only a certain amount of water, especially these last few years. So I like determinate tomatoes. And I was a big believer in heirlooms, and that's pretty much all I grew until I did that tomato study and I was given all these determinate tomatoes to deal with. I absolutely loved them. Huge production, big tomatoes. And I didn't have to water them over the summer because they went for that season and then they were done. I mean, it was like, wait a minute, why am I spending all this water and time, although I still grow black cribs? Okay. Higher yield, water sparing, and they're actually, most of them were designed for greenhouses, and that's why they're smaller. Okay, rodeo, you've heard me talk about rodeo tomatoes. Has anybody grown rodeo tomatoes? Yeah. Okay, and these are tomatoes that are studied in the San Antonio area, including the Hill Country. It's a joint effort of A&M and some other organization, and they will pick a tomato every year that does well in this climate, in this area. And you'll see it in the newspaper, and these rodeo tomatoes. Your local nurseries will have the rodeo tomatoes, and they're going to try. So red snapper was one of the ones that I trialed in the study. I'm telling you, this is an excellent, excellent tomato. They're big slicer tomatoes. Did well, even they're a determinate tomato. They're not too tall, but they have nice thick stems and they stand up to wind really well. I have wind issues. They have a wonderful flavor, almost as good as a black trim or an heirloom. I can't say enough about how good this red snapper was. But that was a rodeo tomato in 2020. Valley Cat has grown a lot around here. It was grown in 2014. It was a rodeo tomato in 2014. I've never grown it. The rodeo tomato last year was Thunderbird. I've heard that was good. Bella Rosa that last group were rodeo tomatoes. This group comes from the vegetable selector and other. The Bella Rosa I'm putting in there, it was the runner-up to rodeo tomato the same year that red snapper got it. I trialed both of these. They were both in the study, and they're the big tomatoes here. I could not tell the difference in the tomato at all, or the taste or the flavor. One of them was slightly taller than the other, but they're both determinate tomatoes, and I don't remember which one was taller. Bella Rosa seeds, I think, were a little easier to come by, which is why I'm planting that. But red snapper, I just can't say enough wonderful things about it. There are some heirloom tomatoes that are on the heirloom tomatoes that are on the recommended list. That is the black prim, personal favorite of mine, but it does tend to crack. But it's a beautiful dark color. Taste is fantastic. Even though it's an indeterminate plant, it's not that big of a plant, so it works well in containers for me. The Arkansas Traveler, this thing can range all over the place. Cherokee Purple, it has a good flavor. Sweet 100, which is not an heirloom, but Sweet 100 has a million offshoots. Like they've got Super Sweet 100, Sweet Million. Cherry tomatoes are a great thing to grow here. They tend to be rangy too. If you're growing them in a container, you're going to need some support, and you're going to really need some support for in your raised beds also. Early Girl is another one that's recommended. Okay. Does anyone, what's this?
Kohlrabi?
It's a kohlrabi. It is wonderful. Okay.
It's a kohlrabi.
So try something different. The recommended okras for our area are Clemson spineless, which is, if you open up a can of okra or you buy fried okra, chances are it's Clemson spineless. Emerald Oscar. Oscar is something that Dave Rodriguez out of San Antonio is real big on. It's a short plant. I got one free last year from when I did my vegetable course. And this is actually a dried one that I'm saving for seeds, so I'll pass that around. It's a small plant, but it just gets loaded with okra. That's the Oscar. The heirlooms I showed you earlier, that's Big Bud, which is out of San Antonio. I think you remember Malcolm Beck. I think he's gone now, but and then Hill Country Red. Okra loves the heat. So if you're looking for something to grow in the summer, grow okra. The main problem it has is with fire ants, pest-wise. Not everything. Other pests pretty much leave it alone, but fire ants love okra. Kohlrabi, that's it. If you're working with kids in a garden or you have a demonstration garden, they just love this. It looks like little spaceships. It grows up off the ground about yay far, and then you've got this big, it's actually part of the stem, and it's a big round ball. So it's wonderful.
What is it?
It's kind of Swedish, sweet. They say it tastes like celery or water chestnut, but it actually has kind of a sweet flavor, especially if you saute it. It's in a lot of German recipes.
Turnip and radish kind of mixed.
Okay, and this is the end. Long beans. How many people have grown long beans? Chinese noodle beans, asparagus beans. Okay, that's another thing to grow for your summer, and this is one that I'm saving for seed. Actually longer. This is a small one. But they need this. I've grown them in containers. They need a trellis. It's a pole bean. But they're called asparagus beans. They come in green. They come in purple. They come in red. They're a perfect bean for the summer because they like the heat. The thing is, you can't can them. They don't stand up to canning. But they're really good for stir fries and sauteing, and they taste really good with okra. Okay, and then the other, and in the vegetable, they were talking to somebody who grows this just south, the long beans, just south of San Antonio. They get $70 a bushel for them.
Wow.
In a specialty store. Also look at various, that's what I'm experimenting with now is different Chinese and vegetables. And I had one last year, Mitsumi or something like that. There was a green one through the summer. All right, colored cauliflower. Recommended for Fredericksburg, Deep Purple and Flame Star. Your county hasn't caught up yet. But the Deep Purple, also another purple one is graffiti, but I like the Deep Purple better. And then Flame Star, there's also cheddar and there may be some others. But the benefit to, if you've ever grown cauliflower, you know, with your white cauliflower, you have to tie the heads up so it doesn't burn and get bleached. With these, you don't have to do that. Just you leave them plain and they're perfect. And I think that's the last slide. Oh, okay, well, I got websites here, so you may have to get close to see them. They didn't show up on your handout, but these are various websites. And I'm going to pass around what this would look like for a vegetable variety selector for beans. And it's pretty accurate. I grow providers, bush beans, and they build out. Okay, any other questions?
Oh, here.
Last year, I planted about 4 or 5, probably 5 different varieties of tomatoes in my raised bed. One of them was black prim, which I love. The black prim had blossom and dried. The other tomatoes did not.
Yeah.
Same soil, same water.
Yeah, they say that some things are more susceptible to blossom and rot. I always have trouble with the San Marzano or the paste tomatoes that I grow out for to make tomato sauce with. And usually, have you noticed it's at the beginning of the season when you first start?
It probably was because in the middle of the season it got hot.
Right, and then it gets hot and it goes away. What they say, now, if you read about it, it says it's calcium issues. And it can be calcium issues, but more likely in our area, it's irregular watering. And that happens in the spring when you've got your garden perfectly watered and along comes one of these storms that dumps inches of rain. We don't have the good drainage. It's gonna happen. That's why if you have containers, you really need to.
Have you ever experimented with the straw bale gardening?
I haven't, but we have people, I've seen it. We've had people.
We did it in Arizona and had really good success with it up in the mountains. If you don't have the dirt, you don't want to do pots and containers, straw bale gardening is a way to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful workarounds for different problems.
Well, the only other drawback to it was when we did ours, we did not get straw bales that were not grown with pesticide.
Yeah.
And it was 2 years after we had gardened and nothing grew in that dirt. It was deader than a doornail. So.
Yeah, they put weed killer in the hay. Usually straw doesn't have quite so much, but it can have it too. And then with the manures, you got to worry about the things they give like ivermectin that they give for cattle.
How often would you water your raised beds through the late spring as, here?
Spring a little less. When it gets on closer to spring to summer, every day.
Okay, so not every day.
In the beginning, no. And you can test. Now, I used to hand water. I still hand water these things, but I have like an irrigation system out in that raised bed, and it's kind of hit or miss. I mean, my husband rigged it up. But I really have to watch my water because I use rainwater.
Yeah,
irrigation, once it's gone, it's gone.
Okay.
So
I have collected.
It depends. It depends on your situation. It depends on what you read when you test. And there's no way to know. You want to avoid overwatering for sure, but you want your plants to grow.
Thank you.
We're just about at 12:30. One last quick question.
So you talked a lot about hybrids, and I learned, and could be wrong, but if you want to save seeds, don't you need to be planting the heirloom seeds?
Yes, you do. And that's true. And like to a certain extent, usually I plant, the mini peppers that you buy in the store. I also buy things like lunchbox peppers from the catalogs and that kind of thing. But for for me, the thing that grows the best are the little ones you get in the store, and I just save those seeds, plant them. The first generation will look pretty much like the parent, but once you get on down to the generations, they evolve into a little tiny red thing. So, yeah, and that's because they're hybrids. They don't breed true. Okra, the heirloom okras, and I mean, Clemson's seedless, spineless has been around for so long. I'm pretty sure that would breed true too. What I did is I grow Big Buck, Beck's Big Buck, and Texas Red, Hill Country Red, and that because they're close together, they interpollinate, and I've had really good luck at that. But they're heirlooms.
You keep growing the same seed in the same dirt, right? You don't like mix the seeds at all, right?
No, you are supposed to rotate. Like anything in the tomato, eggplant family, you want to rotate. And that's mainly for bug purposes. If you're in containers, you've got new soil every time, so it doesn't matter so much. But if you've got a raised bed, they do want you to rotate.
Is there a test for cotton
Root rot,
rot?
plant okra. If you have trouble growing okra, you might have it, but there is a test.
Oh, there
And
is.
you would go to I think you'd go to your extension agent.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay,